Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
The tapestry of California's past is woven with threads of beauty, struggle, and untold stories. Beneath the golden sun and rugged coastlines that greet the Pacific Ocean, the whispers of history remain obscured, covered by time, conquest, and deliberate erasure. Among these stories lies a chapter of a people whose existence was both thriving and deeply spiritual, a people who were once integral to the land they inhabited but whose true history has been quietly hidden. These are the Chumash, the indigenous inhabitants of California, whose connections to the earth, water, and sky shaped a civilization of remarkable depth. Yet, one striking facet of their legacy remains shrouded: the presence of dark-skinned Chumash who, for centuries, held a vital place in the unfolding narrative of the Americas. To walk the beaches of Southern California is to step upon sacred ground where the Chumash once thrived. Their presence stretched across vast territories, from Malibu's sands to the Channel Islands, leaving behind faint traces of an extraordinary existence. Yet, beyond the pottery shards, rock art, and fragments of villages lies a history suppressed, a history that challenges conventional narratives about native peoples. The dark-skinned Chumash, who share the land with others, are often reduced to footnotes in California's official accounts, a story neglected in favor of simpler, more sanitized portrayals of indigenous life. But their contributions, their struggles, and their voices matter now more than ever. The Chumash people were not a monolith. They were a tapestry of diversity. Oral traditions, historical accounts, and recent discoveries hint at the presence of dark-skinned Chumash communities, whose features often blurred the rigid racial categories imposed by colonial powers. These dark-skinned Chumash were part of a complex indigenous network, shaped by migration, trade, intermarriage, and cultural exchange. Their stories do not just tell of survival, but of a sophisticated people whose identity defied the simplistic classifications of Europeans. The erasure of these communities begins, as so many tales do, with colonization. Spanish missionaries, armed with their cross and crown, arrived on the California coast in the late 18th century. The land that had cradled the Chumash for thousands of years became the battleground for their identity, faith, and existence. Missions sprang up like seeds of conquest: Santa Barbara, San Buenaventura, and others, transforming the Chumash's way of life into a distant memory. But within these missions, under the shadow of colonial rule, the lives of the dark-skinned Chumash became further obscured. European colonizers and settlers often failed or refused to acknowledge the nuances of Chumash society, dismissing darker skin tones as anomalies, outsiders, or evidence of intermingling with Africans brought to the Americas. Yet, the reality was far more intricate. Scholars and oral histories suggest that the dark-skinned Chumash were not mere products of forced African presence. They were integral members of their societies. In pre-contact times, the Pacific Ocean was not a boundary but a corridor, a pathway of exchange that connected cultures across continents. The possibility of ancient African seafarers or mariners reaching the Americas and establishing relations with indigenous peoples has been a subject of scholarly debate. Could the dark-skinned Chumash have descended from such encounters? Or did their appearance reflect an older indigenous lineage rooted in the diversity of the Americas themselves? What we know, however, is that dark-skinned Chumash individuals held a place within the broader fabric of their communities. Oral traditions passed down through generations speak of strong, resilient families who live harmoniously with the rhythms of nature. The Chumash were builders of boats, tomals, that carry them across vast stretches of ocean. Their navigation skills, their intimate understanding of tides, currents, and stars were unparalleled. The tomal, often painted red, became a symbol of the Chumash's ingenuity and connection to the sea, a craft that enabled commerce and cultural exchange. Within these boats, they transported not only goods like shells, fish, and stones, but also ideas, stories, and connections that bound their people together. The dark-skinned Chumash, like others within their society, were artists, healers, and spiritual leaders. The rock paintings that adorn caves across California remain as testaments to their spiritual depth, a silent yet vibrant language of symbols that communicated their understanding of the cosmos. Shamanic traditions, deeply embedded within Chumash culture, reflected a world in which the seen and unseen coexisted. Shamans often served as the intermediaries between humanity and the spiritual realm, drawing from centuries of accumulated wisdom. It is not unreasonable to imagine that the dark-skinned Chumash played significant roles within these spiritual frameworks, just as they contributed to the social and economic structures of their communities. To understand how this history became erased, one must confront the processes of colonization and cultural destruction that followed Spanish contact. The missions operated as instruments of assimilation, stripping the Chumash of their languages, spiritual beliefs, and customs. The dark-skinned Chumash, whose physical traits defied European perceptions of indigenous peoples, faced additional layers of alienation. European settlers, grappling with their own racial hierarchies, struggled to comprehend a population that did not fit neatly into categories. In their writings, Spanish priests and colonizers often either ignored or dismissed the existence of dark-skinned indigenous peoples, contributing to their erasure from historical records. Over time, disease, forced labor, and displacement devastated the Chumash. Entire villages disappeared, families were torn apart, and knowledge that had been preserved for millennia was silenced. The dark-skinned Chumash, like their lighter-skinned kin, suffered the consequences of colonial violence. Yet, in their case, the erasure was twofold. They were denied recognition not only as indigenous people, but also as individuals whose appearance challenged colonial conceptions of race. This double erasure rendered their existence nearly invisible, reducing them to ghosts in their own homeland. The question then becomes how we can begin to reclaim this history, a history that is at once indigenous and African, ancient and modern. For decades, Western historians resisted the notion of African presence in pre-Columbian America, dismissing it as conjecture. Yet, indigenous oral traditions, combined with archaeological findings, suggest otherwise. African mariners, equipped with the knowledge of currents and wind systems, could have crossed the Atlantic and reached the Americas long before Columbus. Some scholars point to the similarities between ancient African art and Chumash rock paintings as evidence of cultural exchange. Others note the presence of linguistic patterns or myths that echo themes from across the Atlantic. While definitive answers remain elusive, the possibility alone demands a re-evaluation of the narratives we have inherited. Reclaiming the history of the dark-skinned Chumash is not merely an academic pursuit. It is an act of justice. It is about honoring the lives of people who lived, loved, and dreamed on California's shores long before colonization disrupted their world. It is about giving voice to those who were silenced, acknowledging their contributions, and restoring their place within the broader story of humanity. Today, descendants of the Chumash continue to fight for recognition, land rights, and cultural preservation. Within their communities, elders carry the weight of memory, sharing stories that refuse to die. The dark-skinned Chumash, though erased from official records, live on in these oral traditions, waiting to be rediscovered. Their history is not lost. It is merely hidden, obscured by layers of colonialism and indifference. To uncover it is to engage with a truth that is both uncomfortable and liberating, a truth that expands our understanding of the past and reshapes our vision of the future. The beaches of California, with their golden sands and endless horizons, still carry the echoes of the Chumash's presence. If one listens closely, beneath the sound of waves and seagulls, the whispers of past can be heard, whispers that tell of a people whose skin was dark, whose spirits were resilient, and whose history deserves to be known. It is up to us, now, to listen, to learn, and to ensure that the erased histories of the dark-skinned Chumash are brought back into the light. For in doing so, we honor not only their legacy, but also the truth that connects us all to the land, to each other, and to the stories that have yet to be fully told.